false a blackout. And you're telling people progress. Cost of living gone up 100%, yet you give public servant less. Mr. President, listen to the people. Search your soul and you will confess. And while you try surviving on the public face, then you're gonna know but stress. Cause I done fed up, you done fed up, he done fed up, she done fed up, we done fed up, the people fed up. You're hiding corruption inside the cup, look how evil set up. The people fed up. They don't drive no fair with the citizen. They may want the people speak out. Freedom of speech done gone inside the gutter. Knock off when you open your mouth. Discrimination in entertainment. And you're talking about one Guyana. When the Ministry of Culture keep the big shows. One set of girls and banner. Cause I done fed up, you done fed up, he done fed up, she done fed up, we done fed up, the people fed up. You're hiding corruption inside the cup. Look how evil set up. The people fed up.
PPP will take care of you from erection to resurrection.
Oh, Jesus Christ, if cost of living double, I don't know what happened. A pound of sugar is $300 already. Flour, everything gone up. Everything just raising. You gotta get about $40,000 for buy good ration. You gotta get 3 man now. A weekend man, a monthly man, and a fortnight man.
Good morning and welcome to the APNU's press conference for today, Friday, the 19th of December, 2025. I am Cynthia Rutherford, your moderator this morning. To my right is Dr. Terence Campbell, the APNU parliamentary lead, and to his right is the Honorable Nima Flubes, Member of Parliament. This morning, the press statement will be read in 2 parts, and I invite Dr. Campbell, MP, to read the first part.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. The APNU coalition has reviewed in detail President Irfan Ali's recent address outlining his government's 5-year plan, guided by the president's own speech content and his government's history with questionable governance. The address reveals a familiar pattern: grand announcements, limited detail, weak delivery mechanism, vague outcomes, and an absence of accountability. APNU reiterates that a document of this national importance should have been formally laid before the National Assembly, allowing elected representatives and citizens to interrogate timelines, costs, risks, and trade-offs, and not delivered before a politically curated audience. We are forewarning citizens that this nonchalant forward march of dictatorial tendency. The president presented a sweeping narrative of a people-first Guyana powered by oil revenues, digital systems, and modern infrastructure. Yet, the speech itself illustrates the core weakness of the government's vision: a heavy reliance on rhetoric with insufficient acknowledgement of execution failures over the last 5 years. The vision assumes that scale automatically produces quality. What is apparent is the hurried nature of the policy framework, as many policies have been announced and consultations will follow. Our APNU manifesto is explicit that infrastructure and technology are means, not ends, and that development must be judged by lived experience, cost of living, service reliability, income security, and fairness. 5 years of oil revenues have not produced a commensurate improvement in quality of life for the average citizen. Vision without honest self-assessment is not leadership. It is political marketing set to confine citizens to the inadequacy of government. The president cited the creation of 65,000 new bank accounts since 2020 as evidence of financial inclusion. However, this figure is likely a surge linked to recipients of cash transfers, but definitely not a surge in wealth or disposable income. The proposed Guyana Development Bank, the Junior Stock Exchange, and citizen bond investments were announced without clarity on governance safeguards, risk exposure, eligibility criteria, or parliamentary oversight. Notably, no operational details were provided for the Junior Stock Exchange, raising concern that this remains conceptual rather than actionable. President Ali mentioned modernizing the Bank of Guyana operations to make it more fit for purpose, particularly in relation to driving financial inclusion and financial innovation in this digital era, while preserving and protecting the stability of the entire financial system. This initiative sounds good. However, APNU wants to see it facilitate ease of access and convenience at local banks. The current Guyanese banking experience leaves much to be desired. What is an orange economy if the government is a controlling force and not an objective facilitator? APNU suggests that the government dwells only on the legislative frameworks, long overdue, and get away from trying to domineer this sector. APNU prefers to let private business innovate in creative spaces to be globally competitive and spur job creation. The president announced that the government will introduce a flat tax of $2 million on double cab pickups up to less than 2,000 cc, and a flat tax of $3 million on double cab pickups between 2,000 cc and 2,500 cc, irrespective of age. APNU planned to reduce tax on four-door, four-wheel drive pickups to 15% on the cost only, excluding insurance and freight. This initiative would have promoted new levels of development in agriculture, construction, mining, tourism, and entrepreneurship. As an example, the 2,500 cc vehicle with a $5 million cost will be $8 million under the PPPC's policy and $5.75 million under the APNU, which would have been 28% cheaper. Our four-door, four-wheel drive policy was rooted in facilitating and catapulting economic growth in non-oil sectors. The cash transfer of $100,000 to be issued in 2026 comes on the back of significant abuse of electioneering, where the transfer was promised before Christmas in a most demeaning gimmick. We hope voters understand how trivial small man issues are to this government. APNU's approach differs fundamentally. Direct income guarantees, predictable cash transfers, a higher tax-free threshold, and a livable income floor. Inclusion is not about access to financial instruments alone. It is about having sufficient income to participate meaningfully in the economy. We congratulate the joint forces on their 1-month bonus and note that it's tax-free. However, we are disappointed that other public servants did not receive a similar bonus. APNU intended to offer public servants a minimum salary of $200,000 monthly. APNU's promise of a 35% graduated wage increase was a positive and transformative first step in economic empowerment. The APNU will continue to advocate for the joint services and public servants to receive a dignified living wage in this oil-rich economy. The APNU is supportive of the proposed 5,000 jobs for the disabled community. We are of the firm belief that all Guyanese need a fair shot at economic empowerment. We hope that the implementation of this initiative is effective and urgent fixes are not required soon after, as is typical of the Ali administration. The president announced tax reforms in agriculture, agro-processing, the veterinary sector, animal shelters. Especially, he also announced special development zones where a tax-free incentive regime will apply, the abolishing of the net property tax on individuals, the removal of a corporate tax on child and elder care delivery. These initiatives notably exclude wage earners who are faced with high grocery and cost of living prices. APNU is supportive of tax reforms and had proposed a number of measures to reduce corporate tax and additionally target wage earners by increasing the tax-free threshold to $400,000 per month. The president highlighted hospitals, telemedicine, AI platforms, oncology centers, and future biotechnology hubs. Yet the speech avoided the central constraint facing healthcare, a persistent and worsening shortage of doctors, nurses, and specialists driven by migration and inadequate compensation. No credible strategy was offered to retain or repatriate health professionals. Without addressing wages, working conditions, and burnout, claims of consistent quality healthcare nationwide are structurally implausible as we speak. In education, the president referenced restoring the Because We Care grant to $50,000, but failed to explain why the publicly promised increase to $100,000 along with $100,000 transportation grant were not delivered. Announcing restorations while ignoring broken promises erodes public trust. The APNU prioritizes human capital over hardware, fair pay for healthcare professionals and nurses, student stipends, regional equity in training institutions, and outcomes that are measurable and not aspirational.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. I now invite Ms. Nima Flobes to read the second half of the press statement.
Thank you. Housing. The president claimed 98.4% national access to potable water and near universal coastal coverage. This assertion directly contradicts lived reality, with frequent water interruptions, poor pressure, and unsafe supply reported across regions. Similarly, claims of cleaner communities and beautification stand in sharp contrast to Georgetown's persistent garbage crisis, deteriorating playgrounds, and a landfill system approaching capacity without a clear alternative. Large-scale house construction targets are announced, yet little was said about quality control, contractor capacity and accountability, community services, or long-term maintenance. We note the president's claim that 53,000 house lots were issued since 2020. However, merely placing a title in a citizen's hand without the preceding infrastructure and utilities is fanfare, not sound policy. This is the lived reality of citizens with regards to housing. Silica City was announced in 2013. Where is it now? How many homes have been built? The new 40,000 homes target is concerning as it requires 23 homes to be completed each day for the remaining 4.75 years. APNU's housing vision remains community-centered, 24/7 water, drainage that works, safe public spaces, and livelihood. Not just numerical targets. APNU prioritizes holistic quality at a reasonable development rate over daring numerical targets with poor quality. Digital transformation. The president outlined an ambitious digital transformation agenda. Citizen portals, e-wallets, AI systems, and dashboards. However, the speech revealed a troubling governance gap. Technology is being treated as a substitute for institutional reform. Digital systems without transparent procurement, independent audits, data protection laws, and parliamentary scrutiny risk becoming tools for centralization rather than accountability. APNU supports digital government, but insists it must be paired with open data, procurement reform, strengthening audit institutions, and enforceable checks and balances driven by laws that have the people's interest at the center. APNU is firmly convinced that during elections, citizens' cash transfer data was used for electioneering by the PPP government. Security, justice, and migration. The president spoke eloquently about the equal justice and predictable security, yet recent actions, most notably the hosting and suppression of senior judicial officers, undermine claims of judicial independence. The speech referenced migration policy, but offered no details on enforcement, regularization, labor market impacts, or contingency planning in the context of regional instability. There was also no credible defense strategy, implicitly suggesting continued reliance on external actors. We are still to see the helicopter crash report. Noting on details for his new migration policy, a policy long overdue, and no contingency planning for escalation or hostilities in the region or for the defense of Guyana. It is clear the hope is that our defense will be outsourced. APNU platforms prioritizes judicial independence, border integrity, and national security planning rooted in sovereignty, not hope. While the president highlighted roads, bridges, and mega projects, he failed to acknowledge persistent quality failures, premature deterioration, the absence of accountability for contractors, and cost overrun. Energy plans, including Amelia Falls and limited solar additions, do not meet the demands of industrial diversification, while silence on second phase of gas to energy projects suggests quite recognition of earlier planning flaws. The just completed Heroes Highway is scheduled for rehabilitation already because of a poor initial plan. Instead of having overpasses to allow safe movement of village traffic, more lanes are scheduled. Village traffic will be at further risk when heading east to west. The Mabia Primary School is another project way behind schedule. The Bellevue Pump Project was a disaster in both choice of contractor and execution. Historically, Skeldon Sugar Factory and the fiber optic cable were disasters. APNU's concerns are about quality, is not insignificant. APNU advanced a diversified energy mix, redundancy, renewables for interland region, and infrastructure designed for resilience, not political spectacle. economic diversification. The president cited 10% non-oil growth, but this figure is largely driven by construction tied directly to oil spending, not by sustainable productive sector. Agricultural expansion claims are contradicted by record poultry imports and the sugar refinery investment that bypassed Gaisuku, leaving the state entity burdened by an annual subsidy exceeding 13 billion. APNU also calls for disaggregation, foreign investment data, genuine value-added production, and diversification that survives beyond oil, youth, women, and vulnerable groups. While the president reinforced or referenced youth, women, and inclusion, many regions remain underserved, particularly Region 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10, which lack training institutes, youth facilities, and economic hubs. Playgrounds across the country remain unsafe and neglected, despite rhetoric about communities where children can play freely. APNU manifesto outline regions, specific investment, enforceable inclusion targets, youth stipend, and women-focused economic empowerment grounded in delivery, not symbolism. Values. The president acknowledged social risk, social media, gambling, narcotics, but offered no timelines, legislation, or enforcement mechanism. Value-based governance requires clear policy, not just mention of intended consultations without conclusions. APNU's approach integrates social protection from the womb to the tomb, institutional trust, justice reform, and civic responsibility, restoring confidence through action. The president's address reinforces a troubling pattern: a wish list framed as a plan, announcements detached from performance, and ambitions on more from accountability. How many feasibility studies have been done to inform policies announced? Will we suffer the fate of the unprepared as in Bamia and Bellevue? After 5 years of unprecedented oil revenues, Guyanese deserve quality, honesty, and delivery, not recycled promises. We urge voters to remember the contempt with which the cash transfer was dangled as a carrot before elections. The Because We Care cash grant was pegged at 100,000 per child, plus 100,000 transportation grant. Those were lies for votes. And now the election has passed, you stop with an unfulfilled promise. The APNU reiterates that this plan should have been presented to Parliament, not performed before mostly handpicked political allies. Guyana needs governance that works, institutions that deliver, and leadership that truly puts people first in fairness and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite questions from the media, members of the media, on the press statement. Are there any questions on the press statement? Mr. Harris, I see your hand. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This first question is for Mr. Campbell. Sir, you said that the president's speech relied on rhetoric. After the speech outside Parliament, he was critical of those who said that Guyana is a watch in money, where you have to spend it carefully. How accurate is that statement about spending money carefully and the admittance that Guyana is awash in money?
Thank you, Adam. Everything is relative. I would say Guyana is awash with money compared to where we were 10 years ago. But in a global scale, I do not consider Guyana to be awash with money. And I support that we need careful spending. And careful spending is not what we have seen from this government. We have seen the execution of numerous infrastructure projects that are already crumbling. We have seen the gas to energy project over 1 billion Guyana dollars over initial estimates. We have seen, and in that same gas to energy project, Adam, there is a claim from Linskaya for 100 million plus. In addition, another US 100 million was spent stabilizing the soil under the generator, the gas energy plant. Coincidentally, and we mentioned this in the press statement, there is supposed to be a second plant, a second phase with another plant that was supposed to generate 250 megawatts. I find it curious that as he laid out the 5-year plan, that the president never mentioned that second phase plant for 250 megawatts. Instead, he referenced Amelia Falls and he referenced a 100 megawatt solar plant. I rather suspect that the reason that he did not refer to that 250 megawatt plant is because they have now recognized that Wales was a poor location for the gas energy plant in the first place, and that stabilize it, they would face the same $100 million or more stabilization cost with the 250 megawatt plants, and I rather suspect they've now decided to shelve that plan. I lay all of this before you to point out that this government, with our oil windfall, and there is a long-term threat to oil, Adam, and we've seen it this year. We've seen oil prices fall now. The last, they were in the 60s. It is important that we be prudent with how we invest those oil resources. It's important that we be prudent in saving for hard times, economic shocks. It is important that we be prudent in leaving money for future generations of Guyanese. This government has failed miserably. And I have laid out for you, I've just shared some of the areas in which they have failed. So I think the president should be the last person to speak about us prudently spending the money that he claims we are awash with.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes, sorry. Please, that being the case, sir, have you been able, and I think I thought I asked this question sometime before, I don't remember. Was anyone been able, and I heard Nemo Flubes mention the same thing. Has anyone been able to ascertain whether the government went after those contractors who failed on projects, having collected a lot of money? Tipui comes readily to mind.
I think there's a special exemption for those in the media who get contracts, Adam. So maybe you should get in the contract, because we have heard nothing, absolutely nothing about the government going after Mikhail Rodriguez for, he collected $100 and something million. And nothing has been heard about the government going for recovery from Mikhail Rodriguez. I want to point out that what happened is that with no progress on the Tipui contract and project, the Bellevue project, the government roped in a close friend of the president, Mr. Komal Singh, who is the head of GEICO, to try to bring that project to a conclusion. And this was done out of embarrassment. Coincidentally, Mr. Komal Singh is also the person behind the sugar refinery, which I believe and the APNU believes should have been negotiated. It should be something that Gaisuco itself should be invested in. But I digress, forgive me. So we have not seen evidence in the public domain of the government going after contractors for shoddy work. And I think one could, taken to its logical conclusion, one could arrive at the point that so many of these contracts are given to, as we said during our campaign, friends, family, and favorites, that when shoddy work is done, it then becomes difficult for the government to go after these individuals. So the Guyanese taxpayer pays over and over again for shoddy work by contractors.
Thank you. Any other questions?
If nobody are ready, I have another question.
Please proceed.
One more, and it has to do with the gas to shore project. Sir, you said that there is a 250 megawatt plant to be installed. Could you say where that is likely to be? And you said that government most likely would shelve the Wales location where the initial plant would be located. Are you in a position to say how much money was spent at the Wales site?
So, Adam, let me clarify. There is a gas to energy project. The first phase of that project was a plant that would deliver 300 megawatts. And briefly, that 300 megawatts was just to replace the installed heavy fuel generating capacity that Guyana has now, which is just a little north of 300 megawatts. As a second phase, so on that 300 megawatt plant, the government incurred 100 million US plus stabilization costs for the soil there at Wales. Alongside that 300 megawatt plant, there was supposed to be a second phase, 250 megawatt plant. And this is important, Adam, because, as I said, the 300 megawatts of power from the gas to energy plant would simply replace the heavy fuel generators that we currently have. And the government is leaning on this gas to energy plant to reduce your electricity bill. So they can't keep running those heavy fuel generators. So the 300 just replaces. If we are going to truly industrialize this economy, a lot more power is needed. Power in the range of maybe 400 megawatts, we wanted to get an aluminum plant. So having recognized that the initial plant that they put down for 300 megawatt was really not going to lead to a significant diversification of the Guyana economy, they came up with a second phase, 250 megawatt plant. And it is striking that nowhere in the 5-year plan that the president laid out to us on Wednesday is there any mention of that 250 megawatt plant. He mentions resuscitating Amelia Falls, which, Adam, you've been around long enough to know there were issues with the hydrology and whether it would be able to deliver the 165 megawatt continuously throughout the year and so on. But leaving that aside, he spoke of resuscitating the 165 megawatt Amelia Falls project and the 100 million solar plant, but said nothing about the second phase 250 megawatt plant that was supposed to come to be constructed alongside the 300 megawatt plant at Wales. And the only thing, no mention was made of it. The only thing that I can arrive at, the only conclusion or inference that I can draw is that they recognized, based on the experience with the gas to energy plant, the high stabilization costs, the delays that have led to a lawsuit by Linskaya, that the Wales location was the wrong location for that whole project in the first place. If you remember, Adam, the APNU government identified Columbrook as being the correct location, as being the best location for that plant. But for political reasons, the president moved the location without any feasibility study, because we are yet to see a feasibility study for the Wales location and all of the development that's taking place there. But for political reasons, they moved it to Wales, and now they're reaping the bitter harvest. Well, they're not reaping the bitter harvest. The Guyanese taxpayer is reaping the bitter harvest of that hurried and uninformed decision.
Thank you.
Yeah, but the cost, about how much money is spent on Wales?
Wales, at this point, the total cost is going to exceed over $2 billion US. It's more than 1 billion over, it has a 1 billion plus cost overrun.
Thank you. I see the hand of Antonio Dale. Antonio, please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Combo and everyone.
Good morning.
President of the press conference. Mr. Combo, this is a question directed off of the press statement. Mr. Ronald Daniels previously would have raised concerns about young people who are graduating from the University of Ghana and are not accessing job opportunities, although we have heard the president announce recently that young people are benefiting in the oil and gas industry. Could you say what is the cost for young people who might have a master's degree but are still not accessing the job opportunities as is being professed by the government? Thank you, sir.
So in the statement, we would have addressed the issue of our non-oil economy and non-oil economic growth of 10%. Let me repeat. The president cited 10% non-oil growth, but this figure is largely driven by construction tied to oil spending. The reality is this: the oil sector, and remember, Antonio, that a lot of what is going on in the oil sector is offshore on the FPSOs, and not everybody graduating from UG or graduating from the the Trouble Gold Scholarship Program is graduating with qualifications required by the oil and gas sector. What has happened is that the government has failed. We are already at the point of resource curse, Dutch curse. We have become an oil-dependent economy. This 10% non-oil growth, if you strip construction, and let's look at it, the construction of all the hotels, massive apartment buildings, roads, and so on, it's being driven by our oil economy. Without our oil economy, a lot of that construction would not have taken place. So when you strip construction out of the 10% non-oil economic growth, the rest of the economy is really not doing well. And this is the reason that we have gone further and we are pushing the government for disaggregated data on foreign direct investment into Guyana. You know, prior to this oil and gas explosion in Guyana, the government would release, foreign direct investment in Guyana is so much, and foreign direct investment in Guyana is X. They no longer release that data, and they no longer give it. And when they do release it, when we're being proactive, because they're probably going to release it now. But we say, no. Don't come and give us an aggregated figure. Give us a disaggregated figure. We want to know exactly what is foreign direct investment in Guyana, and where, into which sectors this investment is going. The reality is we have failed over the last 5 years to truly diversify our economy. We've become an oil-dependent economy. Oil revenues, you build a bridge, you build a road. There is no comprehensive approach to economic development or development planning that aims to diversify our economy and prepare us for a post-oil economy. So that is the main reason that young people like yourself with good qualifications are finding it hard to get jobs because the government has failed to diversify the economy beyond the oil sector. And the oil sector, excuse me, will only hire so many people and no more.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yes, one for Ms. Nemo Flu.
Proceed, please.
Sorry, Cornelius, you talk about contradictions in Irfan's speech, and then you talk about premature deterioration of roads. Can you identify some of the roads that have deteriorated prematurely? And while you're looking, are you in a position to say whether the lands once occupied by people in a particular have actually been allocated to people who appear to be friends of the government? You hear me? You hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes,
I heard the question.
You hear the question? All right, good.
As it relates to roads that are prematurely destroyed or deteriorate, I can start. The Heroes Highway is a perfect example. Persons who travel or traverse on the Heroes Highway every day will know. Ever so often, you always end up in a hill or a valley, I would call them. You would drive at a particular time, you'd recognize the road is this way. When you go back another time, you recognize the road is something different. And I can give you a clear example with the piece at Craig, the recently opened area at Craig. There's a particular section of that road. If you don't know how you're driving there, you could end up on a different path because of the wave that is there. I can also reference roads in the communities that are being done, and there's nothing much to talk about. The roads in Grove, the roads in Mocha Arcadia, and different communities that you go through, you see them say they're doing the roads, and if you go now, some of those said roads, it's difficult to even drive on them. The lands at Agricola, is it that you asked about?
Agricola or
yes,
or is it KNView you're speaking about?
Right.
Okay, the lands at KNView, they're there. It's not occupied because we're paying attention, close attention to what is happening there. Because I find it quite interesting that there's plan to now expand the Heroes Highway. And while that particular area at KNView is left unoccupied so far, because we're waiting to see who will come on it. When you drive along the Heroes Highway, there are several buildings that are very close to the Heroes Highway. So I want to see how this expansion will go, or if it will be done in only specific sections.
Adam, if I could add to that, I think in today's newspaper, there is a request for proposal or something I saw. I saw a news item now for the asphaltic overlay of Heroes Highway. You talk about putting the cart before the horse. I mean, everything was done, but with this government, it's done rushed. It's a brainwave. President wakes up one morning and this is what they're going to do without thinking the project through properly, without feasibility studies. And this is why now, almost 4 years or 5 years after they started that whole Heroes Highway, we're now talking about an asphaltic overlay.
Thank you. I see the hand of Ms. Bagot. Please proceed with your question.
Ms. Bagot, you're on mute, I think.
No, she's not on yet.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
loud and
can.
clear.
Ms. Williams, could you please mute your mic so that we don't have a feedback? Thank you. Please proceed, Ms. Bagot.
Yes, this is Davina with Catering How does the PNCR view government support for the actions by the U.S. against Venezuela, while other Caribbean states remain concerned over the destabilization of the region that can possibly occur?
I think that issue was dealt with by the leader last week. I can say that we are concerned at the APNU. This is an APNU press conference, not a PNC press conference. But we are concerned about any threats to the region as a zone of peace. And we are concerned about the risks to Guyana if there are to be hostilities. In our statement today, we highlighted the fact that we've heard nothing really from the government about contingency planning if there will be hostilities. Those contingency planning relate to our defense posture and our ability to even defend ourselves, and also the crisis that may be caused on our border with migrants pouring over. Already it's an issue here in Guyana and has not been dealt with. And the reality, we must plan as though hostilities could take place tomorrow. Nobody wants this or saying this could happen, but it would be prudent governance from the government of Guyana to be planning as though something could happen tomorrow. And we're seeing none of this. So from the APNU, we're concerned about our region remaining a zone of peace. And we're concerned about the lack of planning, that the evident lack of planning by this government for any hostilities that might take place.
Thank you.
But would you say that there's a lack of planning, or is there lack of involvement with opposition parties like the APNU?
I have seen no evidence, and I don't know if you have seen or heard of anything of planning for hundreds of thousands of migrants pouring across the border. Where are we going to house them? I haven't seen anything. In relation to our defense posture and defense capability, I don't expect that these details will be made public. But certainly, if we had a function in Parliament, they could be discussed within select committees and so on. And on issues that are important like this, Davina, you would think that the president, even outside of a function in Parliament, which we are not happy about, would summon the opposition to discuss what are the plans, because these are national issues. These are not issues that the government should take it on, on themselves alone to address and to plan. These are issues where you want to involve the opposition in the planning. You want to get buy-in. You want the support of the country, and not just of your own supporters, your own PPP supporters. So there is no, and I use the word evident, there is nothing that I have seen that points to any planning by this government for hostilities. None, zero.
Thank you. And just to follow up, you mentioned the opposition being summoned, but has the party formally written to the president or any other representative of government, perhaps taking a meeting on these new developments that have occurred over the past few days and weeks? Because just recently, the government, both the vice president and the president, made their positions clear where supporting these actions by the U.S. is concerned. So my question is whether the party has reached out to government requesting a meeting to sort of discuss these new developments.
That issue is being considered by our foreign policy team at the moment.
Thank you. And one final question from me, for now at least. Could you share your thoughts on the new production sharing agreements? So far, 2 agreements have been signed for shallow water blocks offshore.
Thoughts on the new PSA itself or the signing of the agreements? Let me say one. Let me give you one thought. I noticed that I think it's total. Forgive me if I don't have all the details at hand. I think it's Total, Qatar Energy, and Petronas, right, who have signed one agreement. And I found it curious that I think it was a 15 million deposit required, and only 3.7 million was paid. And I don't have an answer as to why the full sum was not paid. So that's one thing that I find curious. I have glanced at the new PSA. It is an improvement on what existed previously in terms of royalty, in terms of corporation tax, in terms of cost recovery. But again, my preference would have been a situation where we had a petroleum commission, as the law requires, and where there would be opposition representatives on such a commission to inform those negotiations. So the PSA is an improvement on what was there before, but I believe it would have benefited from wider consultation. And secondly, I am puzzled that massive companies, that this government would accept only a 3.75 or 3.75 million, if I remember the figure correctly, deposit from massive companies like Petronas, Qatar Energy, and Total for the one block. The second block is the Cybele, I believe, the Ghanaian firm. I don't think there is enough in the public domain about that firm and its capacity. You know, drilling a well is $100 million, and very often it can come up dry. And they have been dry wells. Exxon has experienced dry wells. So when we sign a PSA, I think the people of this country ought to know who we're giving these PSAs to, what is the capacity, the technical capacity, the financial capacity, environment capacity surrounding environmental issues, spillage, and so on. I don't think enough of that is in the public domain. So I would have loved to see more, but I don't think that's going to happen with this particular government.
Forgive me, I think you mentioned that only 3.75 million of the 15 million bonus has been paid. Could you, I was unaware of this, could you tell me what's your source? Perhaps any document you can point to, a receipt or anything, because I've been checking the gazettes and so on for the deposits, but I haven't seen that. So if you have the information, can you please share?
You're going to have to give me a few minutes while I scroll through to find my source on that, Davina. I actually thought that that was public knowledge. 1 second.
I think I have an idea where you're looking, but
okay.
Meanwhile,
well, 1 second. Let me see if I have it here. I think it was a report from Oil Now, GY. It was December 13, an article by Kemal King, and I'm reading verbatim, open quotation. At the signing ceremony, the government announced a total bonus of US 15 million, but the NRF report shows that only US 3.75 million was deposited in November. The government has not indicated whether the S4 bonus is expected to be paid in tranches. That's my source.
Thank you. I see the hand
Thank
up.
you. And one brief, sorry, just my final follow-up.
Final question, please.
Yes, final follow-up on this issue, sorry. Mr. Campbell, since you said that the terms of the new PSA are improved, I recall there being calls in the past for the new Stopper Block projects to be subjected to those terms. What are your thoughts on that?
There are arguments about sanctity of contract, which is an important issue. But I do believe that we can extract more from the current PSA. I do believe that the government has not properly engaged Exxon on this issue. And I will not give you an APNU position, but I will reference you to my own thoughts on the matter, which were shared earlier this year by Kaitro News. And one thought on that was that there could be there was a possibility of a renegotiation in relation to taxes, which would be revenue neutral to Exxon, because Exxon currently, or until not so long, was actually paying taxes on income from Guyana's oil in the Bahamas. So I believe these are not, I come from a business perspective, so these are not discussions that, therefore, first of all, you should have a team that is skilled, understands the oil sector, understands taxation, drilling, everything. Because when we go up against Exxon, we're going up against a company whose, for want of a better expression, GDP, but its gross revenues are way much larger than Guyana's, and who have the resources, the human resources, skilled human resources that they will bring to those negotiations. And when we are going to negotiate with Exxon, we need to do the same. And in a way that is not threatening to other investors in the sector. So these things ought to be handled skillfully and professionally and quietly, so that we can extract better benefits for the people of Guyana.
Thank you. Antonio, please proceed with your question.
All right, Dr. Campbell, last question for me. Given that you come from a finance and economics background, I think this question, instead of asking it from an APNU standpoint, I want to find out from you. You have visited the markets and you've seen the constant spike in commodities. And recently, our sister island, St. Lucia, who does not have a nascent oil and gas sector, but is also known for agro-processing as similar to Guyana, they have announced a $500 Christmas bonus on the top of a public servants. I saw that report, I believe, this morning. What are your thoughts along that line, comparatively with St. Lucia not having such an oil and gas sector, but it's have a nascent agro-processing sector, as opposed to Guyana, who has a nascent oil and gas sector, as well as agro-processing, and still public servants have not gotten what they were looking for? Thank you.
Let me start with the price increases that you're seeing in the markets. Those price increases are coming along because we have not truly expanded our agricultural and agro-processing sector. And the government needs to address that issue with urgency. There's been total failure there. And that's the reason the first thing we have got to do is expand production so as to reduce cost of living. Second, I do not believe that this government has the interests of its people at heart. And we've seen that not only in the failure to pay a public sector bonus, but also the failure to pay the cash grant as promised before Christmas. I will say to you, Antonio, that there are many years that in business I made a loss, but still paid a bonus. And I did that because I cared for my people who are working for me. This government does not care for its people, and therein lies your answer as to why there is no public sector bonus to the other public sector workers. Let me briefly before the next question, because there's something that
do you think they can take a page out of St. Lucia's book?
Of course they can. The St. Lucian economy is not as awash in money as Guyana's economy. So of course they can, Antonio, but they just do not care. Let me just address something here that I don't want to go unnoticed. And Sister Nima read that the president referenced youth, women, and inclusion. And she said many regions remain underserved, particularly regions 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10, which lack training institutes, youth facilities, and economic hubs. I just want to point out that in the president's address, he spoke to the Hospitality Institute in Region 6. He spoke to a first-class oil and gas training institute in Region 6. I believe he spoke to the new stadium in Region 6. We have Region 10 and these 5, 7, 8, and 10. These other regions. And remember, there are a lot of skills available in Region 10 in particular, having the bauxite industry there. But I'm not limiting this to Region 10. Where is the development in these other industries? We are not having balanced development across this country. And I am taking this opportunity to call the government out on this. This has not gone unnoticed by the APNU. And we are demanding that economic development in this country be more balanced across the country and not just reside in regions that you might feel are supportive to you politically.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, only one, and I will shut no more. So you talk about this 10% bump in the non-oil economy. Are you in a position to say, because I saw a lot of talking about gold going up, and then they talk about reduced declaration. I don't know what sugar did, although I did see a report in Starbucks News, I think, which said sugar wasn't going anywhere, wasn't making its target. And bauxite, I haven't heard anything about bauxite. What would have been the contribution of these three entities, gold, bauxite, sugar, to this 10% bump in the non-oil economy that you spoke about?
The contribution, and it's hard for me to give you a figure. I'll be guessing, and I don't like to guess as a businessman and somebody who has responsibility for finance. I don't want to guess that figure. It's not a figure that I have at hand. But I want to touch on the issue here in terms of gold. The gold price has gone up tremendously. I don't know, reached as high as $4,000 per ounce. But during that period, Adam, and if we had more time on this press conference, in maybe in about 5 minutes, I can actually give you some numbers. Let me see if I can do the same thing that I did to Davina in not so long ago. But during the period where the price of gold was going up, the declarations were falling. This is the kind of economics that I can't comprehend. And now, if you notice, the Guyana Gold and Diamond Miners Association recently called on gold miners to declare all of their gold. And let me give you some numbers, Adam. In 2019, right, the world market price for gold was $1,392 per ounce, 1,392. Gold declarations was 641,828 ounces. By 2024, and the price rose above this, but let's just go to 2024. The price per ounce was 2,388, almost double. But gold declarations fell from 641,000 to 434,000. This is what has been happening with gold. And the government is aware of these figures. There is no way that the APNU in charge of this country would have tolerated such a situation. But a lot of the players who are involved in gold smuggling are supporters of the PPP. And so the PPP government turns a blind eye to what is happening in the gold sector. And the gold sector is far more important as a sector for us economically than sugar and bauxite. And I'm calling on the government to stop pussyfooting with the gold sector. Stop waiting for the Guyana Gold and Diamond Mines Association to call on their people. Enforcement, under the APNU government, there was an enforcement team in the Ministry of Natural Resources. This matter needs to be addressed with urgency but it probably will not be, because those who are involved in the gold smuggling are close cronies and associates of the PPP government.
Thank you. Any other questions? With there being no other questions, this concludes our press conference for today, Friday, the 19th of December, 2005. I want to thank the members of the media for joining and for your respectful participation. And you viewers, thank you for joining in as well. Do enjoy your weekend.